This week on Mavens of Data, we're talking with Sean Chandler about how to successfully transition to BI from other roles, how to understand what good collaboration between BI and data science actually looks like and what it doesn't, and how to use self-taught BI skills to advance your career. Hope you enjoy this episode. Sean, for the people who don't know you, can you just give us a little rundown of your background?
Sure. Yeah. First, Kristen, really wonderful to be here. Thank you all for having me. My name is Sean Chandler. I'm the Director of Business Intelligence for a company called CenterWell Home Health, which is the largest provider of home healthcare services in the United States. We're a subsidiary of Humana, which is a very large healthcare company here in the US. As far as my kind of own journey to business intelligence and why I'm really, really passionate about it, I just kind of crossed the 10-year mark for business intelligence, probably earlier in 2025. So can't believe that I've been doing this for 10 years. In some way, it feels like it went by in the blink of an eye. In other ways, it feels like it's been like a century of doing this already. I kind of fell into business intelligence after my MBA program around 2013, 2014. I was, coming off of about a decade of teaching, starting off teaching English in South Korea after my original undergraduate degree and my first master's degree. Enjoyed teaching, but just after doing it kind of around Kentucky for several years, wanted to do something different, went back to the University of Kentucky and got my MBA. And that's how I discovered business intelligence, even though I really don't think the phrase business intelligence came up a single time in that class in 2013. But I learned things like SQL. I learned a little bit of Tableau, which is kind of ironic to me because then I ended up learning Power BI, and that's what I teach now. But, kind of after completing my master's degree and getting some exposure to some of the technology that we still use today and some of the topics that I'm sure we're going to talk about over the next hour, I managed to get my first analytics job at a company here in Kentucky called Big Ass Fans. And yeah, you heard that correct. They build like gigantic sort of industrial ceiling fans and even like commercial and residential fans that are obviously large in size for places like aircraft hangars and a lot of gym facilities and warehouses and places that need to move huge amounts of air, around large spaces. Did that for about 5 years and eventually worked my way over to Humana, where I've now been for about 6 years, starting out as a Power BI consultant and eventually kind of transitioning into more leadership roles as a business intelligence lead and now as director of BI, which is what I've been doing for about 18 months now.
I love that we are talking about BI today. I feel like in general, we hear the term analyst, we hear data scientist a lot. And then for me, at least, I'm a little less certain about exactly where BI sits. I've worked with BI a ton over the last 15 years. Sometimes it was, I built a model and they were the ones who helped put it into production. And I don't know if in 2025 it looks different today because I've also worked in areas where the machine learning engineers might put it into production or data scientists might put it into production themselves. I know that they build dashboards, but they weren't surfacing necessarily the same teams that I was supporting, or maybe it was for a different use case. I've also been in meetings where we were trying to get BI resources to help us because our data was broken and we wanted to move to a new schema, and they were the ones that were going to help us. So from your perspective, in 2025, what is the distinction between somebody who is an analyst or a data scientist versus a BI professional, and like, what are their main capabilities? What are they working on?
The reason I started chuckling when you were describing some of those roles is because sometimes I feel like people that are business intelligence engineers are like that Spider-Man pointing meme, in that they're like, they are titled the same, but they're maybe doing very, very different jobs. Yeah.
And who knows?
Yeah, that's what reminded me of it, because I'm like, yeah, I work with business intelligence engineers that spend a lot of their time building star schemas and normalizing, sort of unstructured data and making that data fit for my team, which is also made of a lot of BI engineers and BI developers, to then take that cleaned data and put it into a dashboard or a report, that our users can go and do like exploratory analysis on and sort of, open up some of our most common reports, maybe while they're having coffee in the morning to see how things are moving. But as far as how I would kind of differentiate, sort of business intelligence people from analysts and data scientists myself, I was trying to think of a, kind of Sean Chandler metaphor this morning. And I kind of came up with like, to me, it reminds me of kind of the weather. Like, anytime you're watching the weather, or at least when I'm watching it on my local news, BI people are kind of the people that I feel like are kind of like gesturing at a huge map. You can kind of see the big picture. You can maybe see that there's a storm 3 days away from hitting you. It's out there on the West Coast, but it's going to hit Kentucky eventually. And data scientists and analysts maybe come into play when the little cards come up showing you like what the forecast looks like for the next 7 days. But I think that, where those two forces can really collaborate and make a difference for companies is what companies really want is, okay, yeah, we want to know what the weather is going to be. We want to know the forecast, but we also know when a tornado is going to hit in 15 minutes so that we can get to safety. And I feel like that is where the opportunity really comes between business intelligence professionals and data scientists to really collaborate, is because there is a visual and communication perspective, but then there's also a needing to sort of get more precise with knowing when something bad is going to happen, what it means, and what can be done about it. And so I think that's why, like in my career, I've been pulled away from data science teams, and then I've been put right back on data science teams. I've gone through this cycle about 4 times now. I started my career on a blended data science team, went in a direction where I was more siloed with BI and reporting and dashboarding, came right back to data science, maybe got sort of separated briefly. And now I'm part of a group that is about 40 or 50 combined data scientists, informaticists, and BI developers. And don't ask me what an informaticist is. I'm still not 100% clear.
So as a data scientist, I've sort of experienced the same thing. We've been siloed. We've been embedded on teams that were actually working with software developers and market, versus being on a team that went directly up through data. And then you're supporting marketing, but you're not like embedded in the same way. What has been your favorite? Do you prefer to, be more siloed as BI? And when you say the word silo, it almost sounds negative, like you're leading the question, but I don't know that it is, or do you prefer working more embedded with the other teams? And, what have you seen as like the, pros and cons of the different structures?
So the thing that I love about business intelligence is that I have this nice buffet of options. Like I like that I get to dip my toes into the HR waters and do like people analytics work for a year. And then maybe the next year I'm doing something that is more specifically focused on clinical. Maybe, I dabble in like finance or sales for 3 months. Especially early on in my career, I was a little bit more, as a more entry-level BI analyst, I was a little bit more of a free agent. It was more, I went where the projects were. I liked that gave me, really, I'd say broad exposure to the company. I got to work with a little bit of everyone. Over time, that helped me sort of see connections between departments that maybe would not have been as obvious to me if I had been in a silo. But the con that comes with that is that you don't necessarily get super, super deep in any one topic. So, I've been in silos where I was like, oh man, I really understand the ins and outs of this specific business area, but I am more insulated from what's happening over here, which is probably part of that's also probably the result of me starting my career at a company with 800 people and now moving to a company that has in the tens of thousands of employees. You do tend to become, like you said, silo does have a negative expectation, but it just fits. So I'm going to use it. You do maybe become a little bit more siloed in specific business areas, and you get really deep in those areas. But then, and that can maybe make it a little bit harder to transition somewhere else. But I am always kind of looking for those opportunities. You do get kind of bored when you're looking at one thing for 2 or 3 years. And especially if you're the kind of curious personality that BI and data work kind of attracts, I think it is a threat that you're going to get kind of bored with just looking at one thing. And maybe you want to go play in another playground. Maybe you want to walk around another park every now and then. And I feel like that's totally natural.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's why I'm a job hopper, right? Is because like
Yeah.
after a while, it's like, you know what looks fun? That.
Yeah.
Um, but for the person who's like just thinking about getting into BI and they're weighing the difference between BI versus being a data analyst, what type of like self-learning might they want to think about? What type of resources do you think would be helpful for them, and what type of tools do you think that they should be really focusing on?
Oof, that's a lot of questions to unpack there.
Sorry, I
Yeah,
do
no,
that
no,
all
no,
the
you're
time. I
good.
like compound them and then I walk away and I'm like, I shouldn't have done
No, I'm checking.
that.
No, I'm checking the clock because I'm just like, we got 30 minutes before we open this up for more questions. No, but I'll try to hit. I'll try to hit some of those quickly. I mean, like first of all, in terms of the skills that people should learn when they're maybe considering BI and analytics, that's changing in real time right
Yep.
now. Like, I do think that for anyone that's worried about like, well, should I still be learning the big three? And the big three are kind of SQL, Excel, and like a data visualization tool, not necessarily Power BI or Tableau, but maybe like one of the two. And of course, there are others out there, but you want to have a strong sort of BI data visualization reporting tool kind of in your arsenal. I consider those the big three. You know, I would say competing for fourth is maybe a skill like Python or something. I don't think that those are going away anytime soon. People have been sort of predicting the death of Excel for probably 30 or 40 years. People have been predicting the death of SQL for over a decade. And I think Power BI, maybe sometime around when the pandemic started. And I don't really feel like those things have changed. I feel like how people utilize them is changing drastically right now with new resources, generative AI. Pick your poison, whichever tool you use, whether it be something like Gemini or ChatGPT. And Humana even has like its own in-house answer to those things. It's really kind of evening the playing field, or at least lowering the bar to really, start using these tools and deploying some of them more quickly, and maybe with sophistication that is slightly above where you might currently be. You could be someone who's kind of average at Python who can now masquerade as someone that is relatively good at Python because you have these great new skills and tools at your fingertips. So I definitely think that that's kind of coming into play a little bit. In terms of like learning these skills, and especially if you're someone who is trying to find your first BI opportunity, kind of the feedback that I give people on my classes is, you need to start kind of adopting the mentality of a professional athlete. I think that there's a lot. I came from an athletics background way back when. I played soccer into college until my legs just said, "You're done with this." But something that really resonates with me even today, that I learned from when I was playing soccer more competitively, is you learn from the best. So when I was playing soccer, I was watching Premier League games, Champions League games, World Cup. You're watching the best soccer players in the world so that you know what's possible, really what you're terrible at, and you have something to strive for, and I think that like nowadays you're starting to see that sort of influencer culture really permeate on something like LinkedIn. And I've got Power BI influencers that I follow religiously who are fantastic, because you want to know the people who are better than you. You want to be able to see, to keep it in soccer terms, you want to know who the Ronaldos and the Messis are, but you also want to know who are some people that are maybe where you want to be like a year from now or 2 years from now. And, sort of have that, you want to have a little bit more to that flavor profile, but you want to know, you want to follow the best so that you know what to aspire to. And I mean, like, and I think that something else I'd like to say is, what art is theft. So, I mean, like, you want to be able to steal and cherry pick other people's ideas.
Yep.
And either make them your own or figure out how to put your own sort of twist on that. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that.
Nope.
Yeah, it's like you'd be crazy to think that other basketball players who are coming up today aren't cherry picking, Steph Curry and LeBron James and all of the amazing things that they do. Professional athletes learn from each other and challenge each other to be better. And I don't feel like there's anything stopping people that are learning or even working currently today in business intelligence or data science from doing exactly the same things. The other part of that is just, you're also you might feel like you're all alone on your learning journey sometimes. Like I remember what it was like when I finished my MBA program, and I spent several months before I finally broke into a BI, trying to find my first opportunity. Everybody still says the same thing today. You send out 100 applications and it's like you just might as well have fed them through a shredder. You never hear back anything, but you're not going on the journey alone. There are a bunch of people on this call that are probably here for the same reasons. There's a huge community of people out there that are looking for jobs, and learn from each other, engage with each other, mainly just so that you are aware at all times that you're not alone. Something will happen eventually. It's a very, very tough market right now, and there's just a lot of change happening.
I love that. So many of the points, especially like watching the people who are great and cherry picking, like, yeah, you should absolutely be doing that, because we don't need to reinvent best practices, right? Like if you learn something new, you absolutely want to start applying that. And then I feel like I could go on a whole rant about the loneliness that I've felt through my career as a data person, because a lot of us don't have like close, friends that live in close proximity that are data people. But of course, now I've built up a huge community. So there's plenty of people that I can call. But it certainly wasn't anyone in my close circle of friends that wanted to hear, me talk about what I was learning in data. And so, you talked a little bit about, learning in data. Do you feel like formal education is becoming less important than it was previously? What are your thoughts on that?
So my wife and I spent about 45 minutes talking about this exact topic last night, because just for a little bit of extra background, my wife has worked in higher education for about 15 years. She currently works as an administrator for Western Kentucky University here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And she also dipped her toes very briefly into the business intelligence waters before just realizing that, man, she was just so passionate about education and working with students that she missed that really, really quickly and went back. But like Nina and I, because of that, we both kind of understand each other's worlds. And so we're also not unaware that other people are having this exact same conversation, not just where BI and data science skills are concerned, but I think the larger apparatus of universities and higher education, and whether or not that they still make sense in 2025, given the expense of going to a university, living in a dorm, sinking 4 years into a degree. Does all that still make sense in 2025? And I do think that that's beyond my pay grade to answer. So you're not going to get an answer from me on whether or not university still makes sense, even though I think that all industries change. Higher education is going through changes that are going to continue to play out over the next several decades. Do I think that the role of higher education is less important today than maybe it was 10 years ago? I'm inclined to say no, but I do definitely empathize with people who raise, is the value of the degree worth what you put into it? I would say that maybe misses the point a little bit. I'm someone that has been successful and found success in business intelligence. My degree is in international relations and Spanish, and don't dare try speaking to me in Spanish right now, because I will embarrass myself. So I'm just like, I figured out a way to make it work. What I got from my college experience and from my higher education background was the exposure to other ideas, critical thinking, having to be responsible for my own projects and my own like homework and class assignments, going, at least having a liberal arts education, being exposed to a whole bunch of topics and classes that maybe weren't my immediate interest, but then finding ways to be fascinated in them. That's kind of the experience of working in business intelligence. Sometimes business intelligence is about being asked to take on a project in a part of the company that doesn't immediately interest you, and then figuring out a way to sort of self-motivate and become fascinated or figure out ways to be curious about that specific topic. So I still feel like there are tons of skills and ways to approach projects that that like academia and higher education still has a lot of value for. I think the question is not whether or not higher education is less important, as much as it's important to acknowledge that there are other technologies such as Udemy and Maven Analytics and all kinds of YouTube channels that are now very, very relevant for learning these skills. And these sort of challengers to university or classroom-based learning may be better for a lot of students at lower entry points around the world than maybe the way that we have historically thought about how people learn advanced skills. Even if it feels a little bit more vocational, I don't think that matters as much. I can tell you as someone that does a lot of hiring that, right now when I open especially an entry-level business intelligence role, if I have that role posted for 3 days, I'm going to get 500 applications. For better or worse, those advanced degrees do still help whittle down a candidate pool of 500 to 1,000 people down to about 100 to 150 resumes that I can actually physically go through and evaluate. So it's like, while I do think that the overall landscape of education and learning these skills is evolving, I'm not really ready to say that the importance of having that degree on your resume has completely gone away in 2025. Might vary from industry to industry for sure, but at least where I work, I feel like there's still a lot to having that Bachelor of Arts or Science or Master's degree or PhD on your resume.
Yep. Yeah. Same. I think it's also, I don't want to say the boys club because that's probably not a good term, but I mean, when somebody sees that you went to their alma mater, when they see a school that impresses them, it absolutely still makes a difference in 2025.
Yeah.
I have worked with people who, took a boot camp to get into software engineering or to get into data, but they still had a 4-year degree just in another topic. Like I'm absolutely, saving to send my kids to school. I think that it's still, going to help get jobs, even if the function of it is different than it has been previously. I also loved what you said about working in other, departments of the company and how you can grow a passion for something that without necessarily, thinking that it was going to be something that you could enjoy, because that's sort of how I ended up here to begin with. I went for a degree in math. I fell in love with math. It wasn't that I knew that I loved math heading into it. And so do you think that there are different personalities that are going to be, the type of personality that's going to really love BI and fall in love with BI versus maybe a data science or, other field in data?
If you had asked me this question at almost any point over the last decade, I feel like I would have been tempted to try to draw some line between if you're extroverted, go here. If you're introverted, go here. And the extroversion might be more BI, the introversion might be more data science. I do feel like that's bordering on stereotype. And especially on my current team, I just see that broken down so many times. Some of the most extroverted people on my current team work on the data science side. And it's a little bit hypocritical of me to make that distinction because I'm crazy introverted. People don't always get that from me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, I'm not an extrovert, but I play one on TV. That's kind of how I feel when I'm trying to sort of give extrovert in my Udemy teaching and on things like this. But I'm very introverted by nature. I think the personality qualities that allow both sides to flourish is kind of having that Ted Lasso mentality of just being curious. If you're someone that is just naturally curious and wants to sort of understand more about the ins and outs of how different business functions operate, and if you're able to develop that passionate for working with data and visualizing something and figuring out the answers to some of those hard problems, I think you're going to be successful as a business intelligence developer or as a data scientist. I would even go so far as to say possibly in life. Honestly, these are skills that I think are going to set you up for success almost anywhere, because it doesn't matter, what line of work you find yourself in. Having that sort of enthusiasm for learning and being curious about what's happening, around you, and sort of how your specific company operates within its larger market. These are all just things that are going to make you good in almost any job. I do feel like from the business intelligence perspective, and I'm kind of turning this back around to like Chat GPT and stuff, I do feel like the technical aspects of BI roles are maybe becoming a little bit easier. And so I think that we're moving to a place where if your nature is to just wait for all of the requirements, and if you want your stakeholders to spell out, this Power BI dashboard needs this, and this, you're maybe going to struggle a little bit more, I think, moving forward than perhaps the world has operated in the past. More and more, I feel like companies are going to start looking to BI teams to be more proactive partners, getting out and meeting people that work in the business, really understanding their problems, and developing, I think, more sophisticated tools that are kind of the product of co-development between like your engineering side, like what I do, and the actual business operators, so that you're building things that they're really going to use. That's not like a huge groundbreaking shift, but I do definitely still see some pockets of BI professionals out there that will build the report, but they want all of the requirements and they want to work at it like, kind of what we've seen with software development. And I think that is probably not a great operating model moving forward, because things like ChatGPT and some of these technologies that we've talked about in this podcast are sort of mandating teams to deliver these sorts of projects faster. And businesses need these teams to develop these sorts of projects faster, because, the industry, the market, the world, everything is changing so fast that they need answers more quickly. And I think that's going to put more pressure on, developing tools faster, and then bringing them down faster, maybe when they're not needed anymore, and spinning up new tools. And I think that to try to turn this back around to personality, I think that means that people that are comfortable sort of operating in ambiguity and sort of helping the business articulate the specific problems that they're having, and helping them understand what our technology can do to fix their problems, probably puts a little bit more importance on the role of BI developers to be communicators and storytellers and presenters, even more than ever, especially more than it was maybe 5-6 years ago, when I was kind of transitioning from Big Ass Fans to Humana, if that makes sense.
That name's like always going to get me. No, and I agree, because the pipeline has not the pipeline's getting shorter, but the data person's role in the pipeline is sort of getting bigger as it's getting easier to learn these tools and take on more work, because we have a little bit more time freed up. And I am the same. I've always described myself as a loud introvert. And I think that, what I love about data is, even, 15 years ago, if I was doing an analysis, I got to take sort of ownership of that as like an individual. I had ownership, but at the same time, it was always wildly creative. I had to think about the layout of my slides, the order of my slides, and the fonts I use, the graphics I use, how to enhance these visualizations. So it never felt like it was some like real nerd domain. I felt like I had ownership, and that it was like wildly creative, like even before we had all these extra tools. And then so sort of moving that towards how we as these people work with others, is there like things that you notice that create a great culture of collaboration between BI and stakeholders, BI and data science? Like, how do we work together best?
Yeah, this is another question that after I'm done giving my answer, I kind of want to hear your perspective as well, coming from the more data science perspective. I can tell you that at least in my career being a BI person on data science teams, I think that a lot of it is about figuring out ways to form the relationships, like, again, things that are going to make you really successful in any kind of role. I do think that sometimes maybe our instinct is to focus a little bit more on the technology and the math and the statistics that people are using, and maybe less so on the people. And I feel like that one thing that has really helped me in my career is getting my data science partners to really come out of their shells, really talk about like non-work related stuff and form those relationships so that when we need each other, there's maybe just a little bit less friction or ramp up time to sort of get both of us collaborating and working on the same page. Because to a point I think that you made earlier on the podcast, even though I've said that really, I think that trying to pigeonhole the personalities of data scientists and BI engineers is maybe not fair or easy to do. We do fundamentally different work a lot of the time. And when we need to overlap, I think it's about just doing what we can to sort of establish that mutual respect between each other. Anytime that I build a BI tool that the data scientists are contributing data or statistics or analytics to, it's about making sure that their name also is on the tool. Otherwise, something that I've struggled with in my career is that when we build big fancy dashboards, we as BI engineers can sometimes get a lot of the credit for a lot of the great analytics work that happened in other areas of our team, because we are the visual interface. We're the things that people click on. We're the things that they use. And I found myself in situations where I was the one getting the slap on the back when I'm like, hey, I just built a line chart or something. And really, I had a team of 2 or 3 data scientists behind me that were spending a lot of time scrubbing data, moving data from one place to another, building flags or something for, like these are the specific data points that you need to pay attention to. But behind the data were all of their like regressions and, other and like machine learning models and other things that they were doing. And then I put the visual layer on it. And the company's like, oh, Power BI, that's that Sean Chandler guy. Let's give him, all the credit for it. And I'm like, no. Yeah. About 5 years ago, I had an opportunity to present a dashboard as part of the Microsoft Mechanics YouTube series that I had built. And it was like, oh man, like I'm the one getting to speak to Microsoft, but there was another, person that helped me make that data set that I could not have built a dashboard without. And that person, I wanted to make sure that he had his name dropped several times, because, you literally, it's, like the old saying, it takes a village. There are a lot of, there's a lot of really great work that has to happen on the way to me being able to do my job. And if that's not acknowledged, that can obviously burn bridges and hurt the relationships. And in order for these data science and even sometimes data engineering and BI teams to be kind of, co-located, there does have to be acknowledge of the other effort that goes in that tees the dashboard or report up for success.
I love that. I had written recognition down just as we were heading into this, and it's so important, and sort of, it's also an art too, sort of trying to figure out exactly when it's time to tee other people up versus when like things are just being said in passing anyways.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think really sets up for great collaboration. And it's tough because we talk about these things and sometimes they seem so obvious, but it's really easy to get hired in an organization and they have a way of working, and you go out to stand up every day and then you work on your stuff. And then when it's done, you present your project. But when there's been, when I've felt like more of an order taker than somebody who's being collaborative, one of the things that I found that has really helped is finding somebody from that team who can join our stand-ups if they're not already invited.
Yeah.
And so that gives them visibility into our pipeline, how busy we are, the types of things that we're prioritizing and why. And then having somebody from my team go to theirs as well, because then you realize that BI is maybe supporting, 5 different functions, and they have all these different things that they're working on. And one of them is like this critical data pipeline that's broken or whatever. And you start to see, hey, it's not that BI are jerks. It's that, they have like all these things going on. And then by building that friendship, maybe they're a little bit more likely to try and, get to your thing a little bit sooner, because that is sort of how the world works. when I joined Vistaprint in 2013, I remember one of the things people told me was like, oh, if you need something from BI, bring them cookies. And I said that on a previous episode, and somebody called it out as like an interesting thing, but at the same time, like, so cookies sort of gets at building relationships or whatever. But that feels like a Band-Aid for something that's actually a lot deeper, right? It's that we need to have visibility into what's going on so that we can work more effectively together and like truly build those relationships rather than like, wow, Kristen's the nice lady that brings cookies.
You lost me at cookies. Now I'm just like, man, I should have my business partners mailing me cookies. It's a little bit harder now that I'm remote. Yeah, I can't look forward to that.
Yeah, right. Do you have examples of what the BI culture looks like when it's dysfunctional?
So for the BI culture, I think that when it's dysfunctional, a couple of things sort of stand out to me. And the first is if you're not getting any face time with leadership, that is kind of the first thing that I recognize, and I can say that like that was an intimidating part of me when of my role when I first started working in BI. I did not fully appreciate just how important analytics and getting data and building these reports, how important it really can become to top leadership, and how much face time I would get with vice presidents, presidents, executives right out of the gate. It's been really good for me because I already mentioned how introverted I am, and that has forced me to change some aspects of my personality and get more comfortable being pulled into a boardroom with like the CEO of a company when they need somebody just to like pilot the Power BI report that you built, which is also, there might be something there about dysfunctional culture as well when they have to pull you in to build the tool that they're supposed to be using. That's also just part of it. I mean, executives in particular are just really, really busy. They're maybe not often the people that are using your reports every day. So I'm joking, but like one of the amazing things about coming to work at Humana, just as an example, was within my first 3 or 4 months at Humana, I got pulled into, basically the biggest leadership call that happens every single month. I was sitting right there in front of the CEO of Humana. This is a person at the time that, is running a company of tens of thousands of people, one of the largest healthcare companies in the country. And I'm sitting there, little Sean, who's been on the job for, maybe 90 days, driving the dashboard in front of, pretty much the 100 biggest leaders at this huge, Fortune 50 company. That is unreal. And that is one of the things that has really, really appealed to me about BI and kind of resonates every single day, how important it is, but when you have a dysfunctional culture, you're not getting any of that, sort of engagement with leadership. You're not getting that face time with them. That obviously sort of puts the burden on the culture of the BI team to think like, well, is this work even really appreciated? Is it necessary? Usually what that tells me is that there might be people at lower levels of the company that are super appreciative and using your reports, but the people that are sitting at the top of the pyramid who are really making the most impactful decisions and are driving the strategy of the company are maybe not using your BI reports. They're maybe not using your data. It may be more decisions off the cuff or gut feelings, and it may not be the data-driven culture that a company needs in order for BI and reporting to really be successful. I think that another aspect of dysfunctional BI cultures is when every single day just kind of feels like the same thing, like you're doing the same kind of rote descriptive reports, like you're just visualizing, a metric over time, year over year, year to date, and you're not really like challenging the team to do, more complex analysis within Power BI. Like you're not really pushing Power BI to its full capabilities. You're just using it for the same sort of, day in, day out rote BI that eventually people are going to get bored with. And I know that I get bored with it. Sometimes, you really like to have something, a burger that's a little bit juicier. And so I think that when you have BI teams that are just sort of going through the same projects every every time, that also speaks to there maybe being less investment in really challenging the BI team and really sort of upscaling the level of analytics and reporting that's happening.
No, I love that. And, when you talk about executives maybe not having your data in their hands, right? And and the PowerPoint, not the PowerPoints, the dashboards are being used at a lower level, then I often find that the work I'm doing is driving decisions that are smaller, that then the business doesn't care about as much. And then I start to think, well, my opportunities for growth are smaller because I'm not having as big of an impact. So do you think, what do you think business leaders who are at the high level, who still aren't using these BI tools, what do you think it is that they really misunderstand about BI?
I think that in my experience, a lot of leaders are so convinced that data is going to have obvious answers, or they're going to think that decision making is going to get easier if I have more reports, more charts, better visibility, when that's not the fundamental problem. I think that there is just inherent gray areas, and the decisions that Power BI reports are developed to help someone make, or the problems that reports are developed to solve, they just don't always have easy answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes, there's definitely a knee-jerk reaction that, executives think that just because they have commissioned or asked that a report be built, that report is going to give them that clear signal as to what action they should take. And that's just not the case. And then, unfortunately, the other side of that can be that, that there's something wrong with the BI team, or that there's something wrong with the reporting that they're providing, or that I don't trust the data, when none of those may be the problem. It may just be that we're approaching the problem from the wrong perspective. May just be that there's not a clear and easy answer to this problem baked into this data. Like, it may just be inherently complex.
Weird.
Huh?
I said her customer behavior is weird. It's just weird. They do weird things.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I do think that there are some of those misunderstandings or overestimation of what a dashboard can really do for a company. And unfortunately, where that really gets frustrating, and what you hate to see, is when that causes companies to start to lose faith in what BI and analytics can really accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. And so we do need to head over to the Q&A portion, but I would love to, I know you have a course coming up. Would you like to tell us about what you've been working on and what that's going to cover?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity. For anyone that's taken my Udemy classes, what I've kind of made my niche, what I'm really passionate about, is that sort of dashboard design and storytelling ability. And one thing that I had a lot of fun doing maybe early 2024, but before I took my new director role and got way too busy to be posting on YouTube, I started doing an exercise that I call dashboard redemption, where I kind of build a report that is inspired by some of the reports that I'm seeing entry-level people build, very novice developers building and putting on LinkedIn. And I'm trying to sort of distill some of their visual decisions down into a dashboard that I create. And then I'm just taking, maybe an hour or two and showing how just a handful of very subtle adjustments to things like color, clutter elimination, and being more consistent in some of our design choices can help turn those designs into something special without, having to spend days or weeks or take a bunch of art classes, sort of calibrating to, build a report that is really, really beautiful. I not to take too much more time here, but a book that I find really, really valuable that's sitting over here on my bookshelf that I talk about all the time is Storytelling with Data by Cole Nussbaumer-Knopflich. I think that book is incredible. And even in that book, or possibly in some of her other blog postings, I've seen her make comments to the effect that presentation and if not artistic ability, design are important in business intelligence and in Power BI. It's not just about, getting the right number or putting the right chart together. The presentation and communication elements of BI are really what set apart next level BI designers. And I don't think you need to be a graphic designer. I don't think you need to be an artist, but I think there are some core tenets of design that people can focus on that just really make the presentation of the BI reports that they're building more sophisticated, more professional. And I think that is something that companies desperately need. And so I've got a new course coming out that is called Dashboard Redemption. It's been a really fun course. And I think that it has a lot of value to people that are pretty early on in their Power BI journey and are looking for, advice on how to design these things and how to make them look a little bit more polished.
I love that. I love that. And yes, no, the visualization piece, that's how you get influence and buy-in, right? Like the information can be the same, but the presentation matters. All right. Are you ready to hop into questions?
I would love to. Nice.
Okay. So this is from Melissa. Hi. I was wondering if you've noticed any slowing in hiring in your company or healthcare generally due to AI or legislative policy changes due to Medicaid.
Yeah, I have definitely observed it. I'm not really in a position within, Humana to comment on behalf of Humana. So this is more just my own personal perspective and just what I'm observing. But it does feel like it is slowing down a little bit. And I think understandably, I think it's I don't know if it is just restricted to the healthcare industry personally. I think it's just broader. It feels like there's a larger economic climate of wait and see. There's so much change happening with respect to AI, economic policy, change across this country and how it impacts around the world that, I think that just naturally a lot of companies are trying to wait and see sort of what shakes out over, the next 6 months, the next year, possibly through the current political administration, just to sort of see what happens. And I think that is definitely putting the brakes on some hiring while companies kind of see, what 2026 is going to look like. I don't know, whether or not some of that will start to open up next year, but I have noticed, just on LinkedIn and what I'm seeing other people post and what I'm observing on my own team that, it definitely feels like it's slowing down just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Super thoughtful answer. This is from Fausto. He said, hi, Sean. I'm a freelance software engineer building dashboards and ETLs with Python and Django. I'm torn between pursuing a BI role or continuing as a freelancer, gaining clients and learning through mistakes. I love BI and truly want to build a career in BI. So I think he's just sort of asking, does it seem like it would make sense to make a move to BI in general, or he's torn about.
I was going to say, I think my answer is yes.
Yeah.
Because I'm laughing at this question because I'm like, man, about a year ago, I was considering whether or not I wanted to become a freelancer. I really don't think that there is one answer that's a fit all for everyone. I think it depends on your circumstances and what you need. And, for people who are really craving stability and sort of working alongside a team, I guess just people that are looking for more of that corporate experience, then maybe it makes sense to try to hang on and maybe pursue that BI role with a company. I mean, there are aspects about it that I genuinely love. And ultimately, I decided that I'm very, very happy where I am. And at least for a little while, I'm going to put the whole freelance idea off to the side. But the reason that I started considering freelance in the first place is that there's also, I feel like a very understandable desire to want to have some of that independence, maybe want to take on, having the opportunity to take on clients from different industries and get more exposure, kind of like an even broader version of what we kind of talked about earlier in the discussion about a business being kind of a buffet and BI kind of positioning you to try out different areas of the business to figure out like what you're passionate about. Maybe you haven't even decided what industry you're passionate about. And being a freelancer might give you the opportunity to try a little bit of healthcare, try a little bit of like commercial industrial, maybe do, moonlight with like a marketing company or something. There's all kinds of opportunities in freelancing that really, really appealed to me. Obviously, I think it puts a lot more pressure on yourself just to, make sure that you have enough income coming in, obviously taking care of like your healthcare needs. I think that there are aspects of it that are pretty scary. And that's one reason why I kind of decided, I like the stability of working in a BI role. But I get the appeal both ways. I think it just kind of depends on where you are in your career, what your family needs are, and what makes sense to you. But I'm definitely not trying to be prescriptive on this question.
Love it. This is from Ahmed. What's the best way for beginners to grow their Power BI skills and build a strong BI community around them? How can a beginner in BI decide on a niche or specialization to focus on for career growth?
It's a really good question. I'm focusing more on the second part. How can a beginner in BI decide on a niche or specialization? I think so. I don't know that I have a great answer on the second part. How can a beginner decide on a niche or specialization within Power BI? I would have questions as to whether or not they mean a niche or specialization within Power BI. I think personally, I think that Power BI is kind of a niche within itself. You might be stronger in DAX, you might be stronger in the design and data visualization skills, which is definitely my specialization within Power BI. But, I do feel like to be really successful in Power BI, you're not going to be able just to like focus on like one aspect of it. Like teams are not really structured around like, there's not like a person that handles the Power Query Editor part and a person that handles the DAX part. You do kind of need to be well-rounded within Power BI. And I feel like figuring out what your niche is kind of the college experience all over again. I think you have to kind of get your hands on Power BI, work with it for, some amount of time to figure out what aspect of Power BI you're really passionate about. When I started out learning Power BI, I wasn't passionate about any one thing because I was learning the entire thing. I was just lucky if I could get my DAX measure to work on a good day. As I've evolved, I've really, really accepted the fact that other people are better at DAX than I am. Like, it's just a natural part of it. Like I can do, 99.9% of the things that I need to do in DAX without consulting a Gemini, but I definitely do. Data visualization and the design aspects are just the part that, really, I think speaks to me as somebody that, took art classes growing up, who, loved writing and storytelling when I was growing up. I love the more communication and visual aspects of Power BI, but I didn't realize that was my specialization for a couple of years into doing it. As far as the best way for beginners to sort of grow their skills, practice, practice, practice. I mean, like if you're coming to this podcast, I feel like you're already in the right place, because I tell the people that I hire who are early in your careers to, and I'll bring up the point that I made earlier, follow the best developers and content creators on something like LinkedIn. There are tons of great people, many of whom have already been featured on this very podcast, who you can follow and see what they're posting and see what the best people in Power BI are doing and what they're building to give you something to strive for. I know that Maven has, really amazing contests that they run every month, on different subjects that work with different, data sets. I participated in a ton of those maybe a year and a half to 2 years ago before I just got too busy. But I loved the heck out of those contests. And there's such a great way for people to work with new data, practice their Power BI skills, and also compare those skills against the community where you can see what other people are developing for the same data sets and the same prompts. And you can see how, man, I thought that I needed to approach this problem from this perspective, but she approached it from a completely different perspective. That's brilliant. I think that, what really has what really has appealed to me about Maven, and the reason that I got so excited, Kristen, when you reached out to me, was, those contests are so valuable. And I think that Maven has done a really, really good job of sort of building that community. What the community looks like to those of you that are on this call could be completely different, but I think the community can be whatever you want it to be. You just need to find, other people that are working in Power BI who are going to challenge you and help you have those eureka moments that make you better. And then, of course, you have to put in the work yourself. There's no substitute for just building lots of ugly Power BI dashboards up front and then getting better at those skills over time. We all start building ugly dashboards. You're not going to be, designing, something that looks like a totally polished, ready for primetime enterprise tool on your first go, but you may be surprised at how much better your 5th dashboard or your 10th dashboard or your 20th looks.
I love that. This is from Michael. I applied for a role this morning that would be a dead-on match for my skills and interests. I was hyped about it until I saw that 3,600 people had also applied. Any additional tips for making resumes stand out?
We've all been there, and I can tell you that is not something that is ever going to go away. Like, you're always going to be up against this. And one thing that my initial reaction to this is we are, all of us, going to have our hearts broken by these types of roles. Don't beat yourself up over it. It's just, this is part of a product of the market. I have had roles where I thought that I was the perfect candidate and I never got a call back, and it's just going to happen. It is very, very frustrating when you see this, and I'm sure that it can feel very deflating. Don't let it dissuade you, not for a second. To get at the other part of the question, though, as how do you stand out when there are this many people applying? This is a perfect example of where I think having a portfolio can be a huge, huge difference maker. My mind is still blown by how many people apply for some of my BI developer roles that I'm pretty clear are, 90% Power BI. They're very, very Power BI focused, who don't apply with any kind of portfolio that I can use to reference their work. Because if I do have, 3,600 candidates and only 2 of them have portfolios that let me see some of their Power BI work, I'm still going to look at those two resumes first. Like, that's just my nature. I don't want to spend as much time as waiting through 3,600 resumes is going to take. So I'm going to start with the people that can go ahead and show me, concrete examples of their portfolio work. And I can say confidently that I have clicked on every link to a portfolio that I've ever been given in any resume to look at it. And now that can be a double-edged sword. If your resume is not what the hiring manager is looking at, that could completely sink your chances right then and there. But I can tell you that out of 3,600 resumes, there are going to be a lot of those resumes that never get looked at all. So I do think your chances are better if you have at least your resume got clicked on and a URL was opened, than to be completely dismissed by the algorithm or something like that. I'm not going to get in too much to like the formatting and stuff like that. I will tell you that I get a lot of resumes that are like 10 pages long, because not only do they list every skill that they have, they also list every technology and version going back to like the mid 1990s of that technology, and that is not helpful. So, I think if you want to make your resume a little bit more approachable, keep it short and sweet. Don't over embellish, your real technical qualifications. Like, keep them fairly tailored to the role that you're applying for, and don't introduce, pages upon pages of irrelevant skills or things that the job is not even, really asking for. And if you are certain that something like BI or Power BI is what you want to focus on, having a portfolio with just 2 or 3 really strong, polished projects that you spent multiple days or weeks working on can definitely help you. And that can definitely be a difference maker. If your portfolio is 10 to 12 projects deep with things that you put together maybe in a few minutes or an hour, that's probably not as helpful. But just having 2 or 3 strong portfolio pieces can be a difference maker. I can tell you that I have definitely hired and at least sent people to the interview round for some of the roles that I've hired based on the strength of their portfolio.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I'd even say, like, if there was 3,600 people and you think that you don't have a shot because of how flooded it was, like, try and find the hiring manager, message them on LinkedIn, only send, and just say, like, hey, I saw that listing. I was really pumped about it. And I wanted to get my portfolio in front of you because, you know,
It's a brilliant call out.
I think, you know, like, right. Like, and just focus on, because, you know, he may not have time to read your resume. He's reading a ton of them. But if you got awesome projects, be like, I wanted to make sure you didn't miss this portfolio because it is bomb. You know, and if don't actually word it that way, but you know what I'm saying? Focus on like, I'm getting this portfolio. Click this link, because if it's micro conversions. They click that link and they like what's there, they're gonna reach back, and you can go from there. You can get the resume in front of them later, because you don't want the first couple bullet points that might not be sexy to trip them up. No, if you've got hot projects, just go for that micro conversion. Get them to click a link to go to that portfolio and go from there.
Yeah, shoot your shot. It may not work, but that's a great call out. I have hired 2 people because they reached out to me on LinkedIn. And in both cases, I also want to say that, you know, you won't always hear back from the people. You like, I feel like candidates, you know, are understandably very frustrated with the process of interviewing and applying for jobs and getting that job nowadays. It is a frustrating as heck process. You do have to have a little bit of grace with the hiring manager. Sometimes there are just forces that are outside of their control. You may shoot your shot and not hear anything back because the role actually closed, you know, internally a day or 2 earlier. But you know, just be professional, be patient. I can tell you that both of the people that I hired off of LinkedIn communication, they had to wait months for me to actually have an opportunity open up. And it had to be the right fit. You know, for those 2 people that I hired, dozens of other people have reached out to me and they've never heard anything back. And it's just because I'm one person, I get overwhelmed and I can't respond to every single person, unfortunately, that reaches out to me. But yeah, like Kristen, your point is extremely well made, though, that sometimes just networking and asking someone, hey, can you point me in the right direction, and just getting those micro nudges forward, that's still progress.
Thank you so much, Sean. It was fantastic talking with you. I love you shared so much today. It was incredible.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. This was a real treat. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. And I had a blast. A lot of fun.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys.